Hi, everyone. Welcome to StudioJake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. But don't forget to ring that little bell because YouTube's doing this weird thing where they're curating your subscriptions. So it won't actually show up in chronological order like it used to. So ring that little bell. That way you get notifications. Today, I have a very special guest. I've got theBlaze's Sara Gonzales. She's the host of The News and Why It Matters. And I actually got to meet Sara when she came to the Daily Wire studio, so that was really exciting. I had interviewed Sara on my blog like 2 years ago or something like that for Conservative Women's Appreciation Month. I went back and took it, and so I'm very excited to have her back this time on StudioJake. So Sara, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you so much for being a loyal fan and viewer for all these years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love theBlaze's stuff, always have. And we're gonna jump right into the topic. I have Sara on. We're gonna talk about two things. First off, is Brett Kavanaugh. He survived the smear campaign from the left, and he has now been sworn in as the next Supreme Court justice. Of course, taking retiring Justice Robert Kennedy. I almost said senator. I just watched Chappaquiddick, so Senator Kennedy is on the brain, but. I was watching everything that was going on with Brett Kavanaugh. Of course, being kind of a political junkie, I had seen the videos of what happened to Robert Bork. I had seen the videos of what happened to Clarence Thomas. But this was just a whole nother level of smear. I mean, we went from Borking to just an outright smear campaign. And I just wanted to ask you, how do we come back from this? I mean, are the Democrats going to be willing to take it on the chin when it's their turn? Because as history tells us, we'll have a Democrat president soon. And will the Democrats be willing to take the kind of scrutiny against their candidate or their appointee that Brett Kavanaugh did? Do you see, or do you think it's just going to go back to business as usual?
Well, what I'm hoping happens is, they learn from this, which typically they haven't, right? So Trump got elected and they used this virtue signaling and all of the things that they did during the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, they had previously used during Trump's, election campaign, all of that. It didn't work. And so what we saw was that they doubled down on it. Instead of taking it on the chin, realizing the error of their ways, they doubled down on it. And that's when we saw them, calling Brett Kavanaugh a pedophile, calling for the, abolishment of due process, which was absolutely crazy to me. But, they doubled down on the virtue signaling. So what I would like to see happen when they get their chance back in office, when the pendulum swings, when we have a Democratic president who, it comes time to elect a Supreme Court justice, I would actually like to see the Republicans not give them a taste of their own medicine, which I know it's really hard because you want to give it back to them, right? You want them to feel the pain. But what I would like to see is the Republicans, we stood up against it. We stood up and said, this is wrong. This is character assassination. You have to have due process. We have to have a method to calling people innocent or guilty in this country. And I would like to see the Republicans not go down that road at all when the time comes for that to happen, and, go through the proper channels. This is advise and consent. And if there is a true issue, bring it to their attention. But otherwise, don't go down the road the Democrats went. And that way we won't have to figure out whether or not the Democrats are going to stand for it or take it. I hope that we don't even get to that point.
And that's a good point, because I seem to remember during the Reagan administration, even prior, it wasn't necessarily about the ideology of the judge, right? And so that's how we got Sandra Day O'Connor, which I just watched the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary on Hulu, and they had the gall to say Sandra Day O'Connor was a conservative. I'm like, oh my gosh, have you not read any of her opinions or her dissents and whatnot? But anyway.
Maybe these days she would be considered a conservative. They've gone so far left.
Exactly. And I just feel like it's gotten so out of control now. But before it was all about the judge's ability to judge. Correct. And I just don't think, and Clinton kind of, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was a political appointment. But even I remember there's in this documentary that I just watched, like there's a part where they show Orrin Hatch saying, well, I disagree with you on politics, but you are qualified to be a judge.
Yes.
And I just think after the Bush administration, not that it was President Bush's fault, but I just don't think there's any going back to that. I think that it's going to be, the president is going to pick someone who is who is at least in line with their ideology. What do you think about that? Do you think now it's all about, that's why we're electing presidents, to see if we can get someone conservative on the bench?
Yes, at least within the next couple years or presidential terms, I do think, just because we have some justices that are, you know, they're getting higher up in age. They may retire, or they may have a health problem, God forbid. But I mean, we even saw with Sotomayor and with Kagan, and I believe that Lindsey Graham even referenced this when he was speaking to his fellow senators, and he said, you know, I sat here and we did advise and consent, and I happily agreed to all of this. So I don't understand why it's become an ideological thing. This didn't used to be an ideological thing. Unfortunately, I do think that it has become an ideological issue. However, I think that it was the wrong play for the Democrats because, again, you know, Brett Kavanaugh, he's not a staunch conservative.
Right.
Trump could have picked someone who was way more conservative. He could have had Amy Coney Barrett. You know, he could have had Mike Lee. He could have picked someone who really, really would have threatened the fringe left. And he didn't do that. So I think that it was definitely a wrong turn for the Democrats. They could have said, okay, you know what? This guy is actually kind of moderate. He's maybe not Gorsuch, but he's moderate. It could have been way worse. Let's just go along with the flow. And, you know, they didn't do that. And I think if there is another opportunity for Trump to put in another Supreme Court justice during the rest of his term, because again, you know, I mean, we've got Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which, again, God forbid anything happened, but the woman can't even hold her head up these days. Right. You know, so we don't know what's going to happen. If I'm Trump and I think the way that Trump thinks, and I get another opportunity to put in a Supreme Court justice, and I have just seen what they have done to this poor man's name and reputation, I am going full in, all conservative, just to make them mad.
Yeah, and what's crazy to me about them not supporting Kavanaugh was, my understanding was Kennedy, Justice Kennedy, actually gave Trump his blessing for Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Because he knew he was a good judge.
Yes, because they work together.
Exactly. And honestly, at this point, say Clarence Thomas or Ginsburg or even Breyer, because he's no spring chicken either.
Right.
If any one of them retired, you know, I would honestly be tempted. I'm not saying I would want him to do this, but I would be tempted for him to appoint someone like Merrick Garland to the court just to watch the Democrats call him a racist bigot.
Yes.
You know, but anyway, do you think if one of them retires, if Clarence Thomas or Ginsburg retires, who do you see on the short list of getting appointed to the court?
You know what? Again, I'm a really, really big fan of Amy Coney Barrett. I think that she has a really solid record. I think that it would be more difficult for the Democrats. Now, this isn't to say that they won't try it, but it would be a lot more difficult for the Democrats to try to smear her name when the last time they did it, it was all about believe all women. Let's hold all of these women on a pedestal. You know, women are faultless. Women always tell the truth. You know, women are perfect. How are you going to then go back and smear a woman's name who, you know, for all intents and purposes, if we're really looking at the true definition of feminism before third wave feminists hit, she should be a feminist icon, right? She's worked her way up to where she is. She has all these kids. She's, you know, a family woman and a career woman. And I would love to see them try to somehow smear her name and, you know, smear her reputation just based on that, because it would be hypocritical of them to do so.
Right, and I totally agree. My first choice was, now I know he wasn't exactly on the short list, but my first choice was Mike Lee. I was hoping we'd get someone like a Mike Lee on the. Of course, then we lose him in the Senate.
Right, exactly.
Then we might, you know, I hate to say, I always say I'm embarrassed now, but I was an ever Trumper, so I voted for Evan McMullin, and I'm like, oh man, now I feel like we dodged a bullet. I mean, that guy's gone nuts.
He has, and I will say because I was a never Trumper as well. You know, I used to have conversations with people, and they would say, you know what, I don't like him. I don't like the things that he's saying, but this is all about the Supreme Court, and I have to cast my vote for the Supreme Court. And at the time, I said, I still cannot swallow it. And now, in hindsight, I've told them all, I get it. I completely understand where you were coming from, because this would have been a disaster if Hillary had been elected president.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, because then, in fact, I remember there was even some talk, because everyone thought Hillary was going to win. There was some talk that there was pressure on McConnell, Grassley, and Lindsey Graham to just go ahead and approve Merrick Garland, because he was more of a moderate, or, you know, the left's version of a moderate. And I think that, and they held on, they held their ground. And now I'm kind of glad that they did, because that's how we got, you know, Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch.
Exactly.
And, you know, why do you think there was the change of tactics from Neil Gorsuch to Brett Kavanaugh? Because like you said, Kavanaugh was kind of more of a, you know, as Ben Shapiro says, he's more of a textualist than than a strict reading of the Constitution, much more so than Neil Gorsuch was a conservative. And so I'm curious, like, why do you think the change of tactics? Why didn't they use this tactic against Gorsuch?
Because it's getting closer to the midterms, quite honestly. I think that, you know, they saw their bell that they could ring and say, Kavanaugh wants to kill women. Kavanaugh wants to, you know, leave women in the streets to die because he might, you know, vote against Roe v. Wade, which, again, we have nothing to suggest that that's actually going to happen. They just saw their signal that they could put out to all of their bases, and they thought that it would work. Of course, I think that I don't think that it's going to pay off. I think that it's gonna hit them big. I think that where they probably would have gained ground in the House and the Senate, I don't think that they're going to now in the Senate, just because they overplayed their hand and they thought, we're close enough to midterms that we can make this our rally cry, and we're going to rally our troops, and this is how we're going to do it. And it just backfired big time, I think.
And I agree with you. And of course, you know, we might see switching topics, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see Kanye West on the Supreme Court. You know, and I want to get your opinion on that, because, like, when I first saw the Instagram picture and the Snapchat, now this is way months ago when Kanye first put on his MAGA cap, right?
Yes.
I thought, oh, okay, this is what he's doing. He knows that Trump has all this big fan base, so he's putting on his MAGA cap just to sell his album, and his album went gold, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to apologize, just wait. But no, he's not only doubled down, he's tripled down, where he's wearing his MAGA cap, and now he goes to the White House. He embraces Donald Trump. He kind of disparages welfare and just everything you don't expect. And I think, do you think that, because Kanye is just such this big cultural figure, especially in the African American community, and I think that this. Now I have to admit, man, he didn't just do it for the votes, as far as I can tell right now. Do you think that this trajectory is going to stay, or do you think eventually he's going to taper off?
Yeah, I think the Kanye one is very interesting to me, because I was like you at the beginning. I thought, oh, he's coming out as a Trump fan and he's got an album about to drop. That's interesting. Very coincidental. But he has stuck with it, especially when, you know, if you look at his base, he's really actually alienating them because, you know, this isn't what they want to hear. They're not used to their, you know, the rappers and the people that they listen to and their role models telling them, you know, be independent. You know, you can be free thinkers. You can do all these things. You don't have to let, you know, welfare hold you back. You know, legal guns are not the problem in Chicago. Illegal guns are the problem. They're not used to hearing this. So I think that he did take a big leap of faith, which to me, the only reason that you would alienate your base, whether on purpose or not, is because these are actual, you know, ideals that you hold to be true. I will say, just as a matter of principle, Kanye comes out and does this, and I'm like, okay, I mean, I think he's been a little bit crazy for the last several years, right? So I take everything he says with a grain of salt. However, you know, my issue with the whole Kanye, you know, coming out and talking with President Trump is the media's handling of it and the media's treatment of him. We saw Taylor Swift come out, and she had been silent about her political affiliation for so long, and finally it was just too important to her that she had to, you know, slam Marsha Blackburn in the Tennessee race. And of course, then we saw Marsha Blackburn's polls go up. Right. We saw her go up in the polling. So of course, we know that that didn't actually do the trick for Taylor's candidate. However, you know, the media treated her like she was just so great. We're just so excited that Taylor Swift came out. And now that Kanye is doing the same thing, you know, you've got members of his own Black community saying that they want to trade him in the racial draft. They're bringing up his mother, saying she must be rolling in her grave. Now, all of a sudden, he's mentally ill to them. And right. It's just, it's upsetting to see the media treat him so poorly when, you know, like it or not, like his political affiliations or not, I don't typically care what celebrities think. It doesn't affect me either way. I'm not going to latch on to something because they say they believe it, and I'm not going to disassociate myself because they believe differently than me. However, you know, if they're being, you know, unbiased, if they're being objective, you would actually see them say, wow, here's a guy who actually believes in something. He wants to talk to the president about not stopping and frisking, you know, and that policy. He wants to talk to the president about gun violence in Chicago. He wants to talk to the president about real issues. Good for him for using his platform to do something that he believes in. And we haven't seen that here. And I just think that it's absolutely a disgrace to media. And I think it was very racist what I saw on CNN.
Oh yeah, CNN. It was horrible on CNN. I mean, it was like,
if you had seen, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
go ahead.
If you had seen, let's say, let's turn the tables and talk about Taylor Swift coming out. If you had seen Tucker Carlson on Fox News tell everyone that Taylor Swift had, you know, disgraced the white community and had, you know, we wanted to trade her in the racial draft, he would be fired from Fox News right now.
Oh yeah, easily. And I also think that this shows, I also feel like Taylor Swift's coming out, like she endorsed Marsha Blackburn's opponent, right? I feel like she did a safe pick.
Yes.
Like, because everyone knows Marsha Blackburn is going to win that race. I mean, even she was kind of struggling in the polls, and I think that had to do with the pre-Kavanaugh Trump effect.
Yes.
But everyone kind of, because Tennessee is a weird state because they typically vote Republican local races, and then national they tend to go blue. And it's kind of weird like that. And Texas used to be that way. Now they went all red, and now I think I just heard, I think Ted Cruz was being interviewed by Steven Crowder, and he said, you know, Texas is slowly becoming purple, and we have to fight against that. But I really feel like Taylor Swift was a safe pick, just to say, hey, here I am. I supported a Democrat. Now get off my back.
Right. And I think it's funny because, you know, you see in the media and you see in Hollywood, everyone is totally fine with a celebrity, you know, an actress, a musician, whoever it may be. Everyone's totally fine with them coming out in support of, you know, a political candidate until it's a conservative. And I think that, you know, typically we see conservatives, like, I don't care. I don't care who Taylor Swift says that she supports. I don't care who, you know, Mel Gibson, whoever it is. I don't care who they say they support. But typically liberals have always seen Hollywood support liberals, so they're not used to it. And then all of a sudden they see them support a conservative, and it's like they can't fathom the idea of a person in Hollywood, an A-list celebrity, supporting conservative ideas, and they just don't know. I think they genuinely don't know what to do with themselves because it's such a foreign feeling. Whereas as conservatives, we've seen that all the time. If we, you know, somehow boycotted everyone who didn't believe what we believed, we would never go to the movies. We would never go to concerts. We would never be able to do anything.
Yeah, there's exactly one actor, Sean Penn. I purposely don't go see his movies because we actually saw him support, you know, violent drug lords and brutal dictators. So I don't go see his films. Yes. Dennis Rodman's retired.
Luckily for you, he's not in much anymore.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Yeah, which people were making fun of him because the last film he did, totally a pro-gun movie, and you know, it's a lot. I remember people making fun of him about that. It's kind of like, oh, you're anti-gun unless, you know, Maduro is has firing squads, but then you're going to make a movie where it's all of these you know, gun battles and the hero is using a gun and all this. But anyway,
and you're fine profiting off of making a movie about gun violence.
Exactly. Yeah, that happened to Quentin Tarantino, right? Because all his movies are about guns or have guns in them. I wouldn't say they're about guns.
Well, they're not even just they have guns in them. They're like super violent.
Right. And I honestly, maybe I don't get the appeal of a Tarantino movie anyway. This is something me and Christian Toto, we got into a Twitter spat because apparently Paramount is like going to tap him to do a Star Trek movie. And I'm like, seriously, Quentin Tarantino? And so it was so funny. Me and Toto, Christian Toto, were going back and forth about that. I just don't think that's going to be a good movie.
No, I don't think so either.
But anyway, one last question on this Kanye topic is, do you think this will have an impact on the African-American community? I'm not saying like they're going to, you know, switch red overnight, but do you think that this will, because he is a big standing member in the community, do you think after all the CNN's racist panels and all this, do you think that it will have some sort of impact on that community, as seeing one of their biggest stars, you know, supporting Trump and even embracing him, literally?
Yeah, I think that if they're looking objectively about issues within their own community and they really are wanting to solve all of these issues, I think that they will take a step back and they will look and say, okay, you know what? He's right. There are, you know, hundreds, thousands, you know, of people dying in Chicago every year due to gun violence. There are all of these issues, and they have to look at the issue that they want to solve and say, who is the person who wants to work towards solving the issues and who is the person who just wants to complain? And, you know, I think that the people who are actually in it to solve the issues and in it for the good, I hope that objectively they can see that he is trying to, you know, at least help the Black community. Now, I think that there is also a great majority of people in the Black community who have no interest in making nice, who have no interest in solving problems. I think that they are so used to, because a lot of places it's in their culture to just, we don't like white people. White people have held us down, and that's just where we are. And so I think that we're going to have to see a lot of generational changes to see a large portion of the Black community latch on to Kanye's ideas and maybe actually make progress. But again, I do think that there is probably a small number of people within that community that might stop and go, okay, I've listened to Kanye. I respect Kanye. I think that Kanye, you know, maybe a little bit out there, but he knows what he's talking about some of the time, or whenever he talks about something reasonably, I can understand that. And, you know, hopefully there will be at least some sort of positive change that can come from that.
All right, so I always ask my my guests a curveball question at the end. Okay. So here is your curveball question. What is your favorite Taylor Swift song and why?
You know what? Okay, I'll tell you. My favorite Taylor Swift song is Hey Steven, because that actually happens to be my fiance's name. Oh. And so it's kind of our little song that we play on Alexa all the time. And I just admitted that I have an Alexa. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible addiction. I know Amazon is listening in on me all the time, and it's too convenient, but it's got to be Hey Steven by Taylor Swift.
All right, that's really good. Sarah, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter. I believe you have that behind you.
Yeah, right up
yes, here. At Sara Gonzales TX on Twitter. It's the same for Facebook and for Instagram. And then they can watch our show on theBlaze. It is at 4:30 Central, 5:30 Eastern, the news and why it matters. And they can tweet us using the hashtag theBlazeWhy if they want to tweet the show, any kind of questions or comments.
And of course, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at RealJacobAiry. Instagram is real.jacob.airy. My Facebook is author Jacob Airy. And of course, you can find my political writings on the Daily Wire. And also check out my blog. I've got a ton more articles. I write movie reviews and graphic novel reviews. So definitely head over there. It's jacobairy.blog. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video here on Studio Jake. Next week, I am going to be doing a pre-recorded episode because I'm going to Politicon. And then the following week, I'm going to have another pre-recorded episode because I'm going to LA Comic-Con, which I'm very excited about. It's actually my first, I know I'm 30 years old. It's my first ever Comic-Con. I'm very excited about this. So the Comic-Con one, I'm finally doing it. I'm breaking down why Batman White Knight is probably one of the worst written Batman stories ever. Apologies to Sean Gordon Murphy. You're a great artist, lousy writer. I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.